anyway. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a special good evening to Mr. Donnie Loftus, who is our 109th District Representative in Raleigh. Hey, I voted for you, sir. And Mr. Chad Hawkins, who is our Sheriff-elect. I voted for you too, sir. And also Jeremy Fowler, who is a commissioner in Ranlow. I'm sorry I didn't vote for you, but I don't live in Ranlow. I don't know about you, but standing there when the national anthem was played with the colors virtually right in my face, I still get shivers down my spine. I don't know about you, but that's just something that has been throughout my military career. Well, I have to say you Marines here tonight are kind of slumming. You've invited a swabby to come speak to you. Well, hey, come on, we're all part of the Department of the Navy, right? I know the Marines are the men's department. However, I've never met a combat infantry Marine veteran who would disagree with the statement that the Marines already have a few good men. Navy corpsmen and chaplains. Because when the call for medic or corpsman goes up, they get up and move toward the fire. And they're largely unarmed. Now, one thing I do have in common with each and every Marine here this evening was that as each of us began our active duty adventure, we had to get past a sergeant or a staff sergeant that wore a large felt Stetson and a large brass, highly polished belt buckle emblazoned with the eagle, globe, and anchor. For me, he was Staff Sergeant Mace, United States Marine Corps. Mace, what a name for a drill instructor. Well, after college, I applied to become a Navy pilot. I got accepted to be a Naval Flight Officer candidate. And I began my active duty career through the doors of Aviation Officer Candidate School, AOCS, in Pensacola, Florida, in January 1979. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen the old movie Officer and a Gentleman or not.
One way to the bathroom.
I was a Lieutenant J.G. when that movie came out, and I went to see it in a theater at a weekday matinee. I cringed as I watched the movie. I knew half the lines in that movie before they were said. Now, don't go to Fist City with the drill instructor, and I didn't have a classmate commit suicide. But every other evolution in that movie was right on cue. A scene early in the movie where Richard Gere's class was collapsing after some early PT. And then all of a sudden, a senior class about to be commissioned, running in formation up from the beach, looking sharp, chanting Jody. A lady sitting a few rows behind me with her husband blurted out, "You gotta be kidding." I almost turned around and said, "Hey lady, I've been through that school. This movie is a freaking documentary." Over the course of 14 weeks, Staff Sergeant Mace, United States Marine Corps, led 15 of the 30 of us who started, college boys, long-haired, all butterbark jokes aside, to be prepared to be commissioned as ensigns in the United States Navy. Also, I don't know if you can make this claim about your drill instructor, but I was amazed at the motivational power that Staff Sergeant Mace, United States Marine Corps possessed, without ever really raising his voice. Oh sure, that abdominal, strong command voice on the parade field, but never in a disciplinary way at any of us. He possessed immense gravitas without ever raising his voice. Now, is it a small world? Well, about 10 years ago, my wife and I took our son to Hargrave Military Academy up in Chatham, Virginia for the last 3 semesters of his high school. As we went through the matriculation process from office to office, we entered the office of the college placement officer. A Sergeant Major Payne, United States Marine Corps, retired. And he was going through his spiel about the school's honor code. And I'm looking at him going, I know you from somewhere. Where do I know you from? And I'm thinking, I've done a lot of exercises with Marine staffs, and I've known some pretty top senior enlisted folks. Then it dawned on me. He finished his spiel, asked if we had any questions. I looked at him and I said, Sergeant Major, did you ever do a tour in Pensacola, Florida? Yes, sir, 77 to 79. I thought so. I had known him as Sergeant Payne, United States Marine Corps. Yeah, and again, Payne, what a name for a drill instructor. Now tell me, Marines, do you all use a drill instructor's last name as a selection criteria? Well, Sergeant Payne, United States Marine Corps, was not my drill instructor. In fact, he wasn't even in my battalion. But I recounted to him a very personal, and for me, extremely unpleasant interaction we had shared those 35 years prior. And we actually had a pretty good laugh. I don't know if Martin knew what to think. As an aside, I'm told that even Marine colonels and generals will glance at their gig line and stand a little taller when they see that felt Stetson and large brass belt buckle. I've worked with a number of staffs, Marine staffs, and done a number of exercises, particularly later on in my military career, my reserve status. I was in the TACRINE community in the reserves. Mostly I did exercises with 3-meth out of the Rock in Okinawa. I was, however, an E-2C Hawkeye naval flight officer in the E-2C Squadron, VAW 121, embarked in the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in the Mediterranean when the Marine barracks was blown up at Beirut on October 23rd, 1983. We were actually in Port Naples, Italy that Sunday morning, and we got an emergency underway order. And 4 hours later, we pulled the hooks, then south, then east. We in fact had to send a helicopter to Rome to get the commanding officer of the ship. And then our C-2A Greyhound COD aircraft shuttled sailors from the beach to the ship that couldn't get back to the ship in time for the better part of a day and a half. And then we remained your heavy supporting arms off the coast of Beirut until we were relieved on station by the USS Kennedy Battle Group in early mid-December 1983. Now I want to tell you about another distinguished Marine that I had the privilege to meet. In fact, he was mentioned in that video. Herschel Woody Williams. He's even had a Navy warship named after him. Our son Martin was in the pre-commissioning crew of that ship, the USS Herschel Woody Williams, Expeditionary Sea Base ship, ESB-4. At the time of the commissioning, Woody was 95 years old, and at that point he was the last surviving Marine Corps veteran of the Pacific Theater who was a recipient of the Medal of Honor. Now, he did retire as a CWO4, but he earned that Medal of Honor as a corporal, as a flamethrower guy in the Battle of Iwo Jima. This is from his Medal of Honor citation. Quick to volunteer his services when our tanks were maneuvering vainly to open a lane for the infantry through a network of reinforced concrete pillboxes, buried mines, and black volcanic sands. Corporal Williams daringly went forward to attempt reduction of the devastating machine gun fire from the unyielding positions. Covered only by 4 riflemen, he fought desperately for 4 hours under terrific enemy small arms fire, and repeatedly returned to his own lines to prepare demolition charges and obtain service flamethrowers, struggling back frequently to the rear of hostile emplacements to wipe out one position after another. On one occasion, he daringly mounted a pillbox to insert the nozzle of his flamethrower through the vent, kill the occupants, and silence the gun. Another, he grimly charged enemy riflemen who attempted to stop him with their bayonets, and destroyed them with a burst of his weapon. His unyielding determination and extraordinary heroism in the face of ruthless enemy resistance were directly instrumental in neutralizing one of the most fanatically defended Japanese strongpoints encountered by his regiment, and aided in enabling his company to reach its objective. Corporal Williams' aggressive fighting spirit and valiant devotion to duty throughout this fiercely contested action sustain and enhance the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. Here's a little more backstory on Woody, who you heard mentioned. I met Woody at the commissioning of ESB-4 in November of 2019. Woody was from West Virginia, and he was in town for a few days around the commissioning. The day before the commissioning, the ship's crew held a private luncheon on board to honor him. During the luncheon, the commanding officer, Captain David Gray, showed Woody a beautiful shadow box with replicas of his medals and awards that they would use to honor him on board the ship. The captain did then apologize to Woody because the replica they were having made of his Medal of Honor had not yet arrived due to some procurement constraints. Woody, who always proudly wore his Medal of Honor, rolled his head forward, removed his Medal of Honor, and presented it to the captain. He bequeathed his original Medal of Honor, initially put around his neck by President Truman, to the ship named in his honor. As you heard in my introduction, I narrate audiobooks. I've done many military biographies and memoirs of combat veterans. I produced anthologies of combat veteran stories from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and what the author called small wars and nation building, or armed conflicts since Vietnam. I had the privilege in the Korean War anthology to read the story of a U.S. Marine Corps platoon commander. Both he and his Navy corpsmen were both awarded a Navy Cross. The platoon commander went on to serve in Congress. In fact, he even became a presidential candidate. His name? Pete McCluskey Jr. Maybe some of you remember his name. Early June 1951 on Hill 610 in the Punch Bowl, 23-year-old 2nd Lieutenant McCluskey found himself in a heated battle. Attesting to the valor of his Navy corpsman, HM3 Thomas Burchett, here in McCluskey's words, with half the ridge still held by the enemy, 1st Platoon fixed bayonets and moved up and to the left and on the middle of 610. Our forward movement stopped about 5 yards from the crest of a 200-yard ridge line extending west from 610, and we engaged in grenade rolling with NKPA that had retired just below the crest on the other side. I was lying beside a teenage machine gunner named Zamora, an Indian that we called Chief, whose gun was trained on the crest above us, when a grenade fragment went into his throat and he couldn't breathe. I yelled for a corpsman, and Doc Burchett came up, turned Zamora over, and made a hole in Zamora's throat with his sheath knife, and put a tube or twig into it. He made Zamora, who had been turning blue, hold it with his hand so he could breathe through the hole, and then taped Zamora's hand to his throat to hold the hole open. In a few minutes, Zamora was able to sit up and then move downhill for treatment. Thomas Burchett's operation, no more than 10 yards from enemy riflemen, and with grenades exploding every few seconds, may have been the closest surgery performed to an enemy during combat. Later, I put Burchett up for a Navy Cross for his action, and much later I learned at the Naval History Museum that his surgery was the closest ever performed to active enemy. Burchett, 19 years old, had read about a tracheotomy, but had never seen one. One more member of the Navy Marine Corps team I want to tell you about is Chaplain Father Vincent Capodanno, lovingly known as Father Vince, the Grunt Padre. I had the privilege to narrate his biography of that title a few years ago. Father Capodanno was a Maryknoll Catholic priest in the early 1960s. After serving in Asia for a couple of years after his ordination, he asked to become and became a Navy chaplain. He then immediately asked to be assigned with Marines in Vietnam. He was sent to the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, 1-7. After completing his year in country, he applied for and was granted an extension. And he was then sent to 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. His Marines loved him. A typical fighting man of the 1960s, Capodanno did enjoy smoking. In fact, he was kind of known as a bit of a chain smoker. He even learned how to smoke at night in battle. Lieutenant Frederick Smith, United States Marine Corps, taught the good Padre how to make a smoking machine. You put a hole in a C-ration box and put the cigarette inside the box. and then a poncho over top, thus being able to smoke without giving off a glow which could attract enemy fire. By the way, Lieutenant Frederick Smith, United States Marine Corps, you may be more familiar with him as Fred Smith, the founder and former CEO of FedEx. When I shared that story with a former Marine friend of mine, he just said, yeah, but who was the Lance Corporal that taught the lieutenant? Father Capodanno lost his life Labor Day weekend of 1967 in Operation Swift. He died giving aid and comfort to a wounded Marine, ultimately using his body to shield the Marine and saving the Marine's life. Father Capodanno was subsequently awarded the Medal of Honor, and his case for canonization, sainthood in the Catholic Church, is ongoing and progressing smartly. When I completed the combat veteran stories of the Vietnam War, I looked at a number of the stories of the contributors. Now, none of them mentioned Father Capodanno by name, but I could tell from timelines and unit assignments, a number of them may well have known him. So I put out the word through the author to let any of those men know, and I would be delighted to give them a copy of the audiobook of the Grunt Padre. One Marine who responded, now a retired colonel, said, "Hey, I'm the unnamed second lieutenant on page 142. The unnamed second lieutenant, now Captain Joaquin Gresita, United States Marine Corps retired, accompanied the senior chaplain, Captain Takizian, into Father Capodanno's tent to inventory his effects after he was killed. As I reflect on the significance of this, the 247th birthday of the United States Marine Corps, I'm humbled by the quality of men and women who have gone before me. Comrades in arms, co-members of the Navy Marine Corps team, I thank each and every one of you Marines here this evening for your service, and each other veterans. And I know it's not only the Marine Corps that's represented here tonight. And also to any of you spouses who were married to your Marine or veteran during their term of service, thank you for your service as well. As you also heard in my introduction, I do wear a hat as a blue and gold officer at the United States Naval Academy. I don't know if you realize it or not, but about 25% of the graduating class of the Academy gets a commission as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. I have to say that the quality of young people that I've helped counsel through that Academy application process gives me great hope for the future of our great nation. Let us pray it continues to be so. Semper Fi, and happy birthday, Marines, and go Navy, beat Army. And God bless America.
Sir, you mentioned something about a volcanic island. Iwo
Yes, sir.
When I went in the Marine Corps in '69, they said, I know some heroes. I said, see that thing out on the parade stage? Those guys raising that flag? They told me what that was. Those were heroes. And I met two of them. And I became friends with two of them. Mac Drake and Joe Tedder.